Today we are talking about planning for couples without children.
It's time for a Wicked Pissah podcast.
Wicked Pissah podcast?
Wicked Pissah podcast?
It's time for a Wicked Pissah podcast.
Welcome to the Wicked Pissah podcast, a production of the Financial Planning Association of New England, intended for financial planning advisors.
All right, welcome to the Wicked Pissah podcast. I'm Chris Boyd, past president of the chapter and ongoing host at this point of the Wicked Pissah podcast, co-host with many others, including Kathleen Keneally. And Kathleen is the founder of Catapult Financial Planning and currently a director of programming. Are you specifically programming, Kathleen?
Director of programming. I'm on the board this year. So
for the chapter, the New England chapter.
The New England chapter. Yep. So excited about all the events that we have lined up this year. We have one more. I'll do a little quick plug. November 19th coming up in York, Maine, our Love and Money themed event. So fpanewengland.org to register.
Joining us for this episode is Bill Harris, a past president as well, my immediate predecessor.
And I was a programming chair as I worked my way up the ranks. So.
Nice.
Yes, we've all been there, right? Yeah, that's a fun one, but a hard one, right?
And I will honestly say it was one of the funnest jobs I have. And back in the day, we had big budgets, so we got to bring in some pretty neat speakers. So it was a different environment, but it really was a great job.
Yeah, it is fun. I enjoy it a lot. Programming
is so essential to the way members oftentimes experience their chapter involvement is through all the great events, the opportunities for education and so forth. But there are many other ways, and we won't do that today. That's not the point of our episode. Today, we are talking about planning for couples without children. And I am sure that there are some significant differences in how that planning works. Bill, you happened to post something on LinkedIn, caught my eye, just that you had that as a hook you were talking about. Is that an area of practice that you do a lot of planning in?
My immediate answer is no, but if I can give you a little bit of background on that, a little prop out there for the street, which is the editor is Bob Powell, who's very great friends of the FPA, and planners who looking to write some articles, I'm sure they're always welcome there, and so. What I had been seeing in practice was a lot of couples coming to me and they didn't have any kids. So I wasn't necessarily looking for it, but I started to experience it on quite a regular basis. And I started to do some research into it. And I was kind of shocked that the numbers were huge. If I may share some stats with you guys, I think it's 44% of the 18 to 49-year-old crowd have no plans on having kids. Right now, age 55 or older, it's 15.2 million people that don't have any kids. It's roughly 1 in 6 people. So again, I just started to see the numbers, and I can tell you the accumulation planning, financial planning for childless couples is easy. The estate planning, not so much so. That's where the challenge is.
So to that point, I looked up today, what's the cost of raising a child? The number I came up with in Massachusetts is $35,841. If you multiply that out times 18 years, that's about $645,000 per child. And that doesn't include college expense in that number. So, as you said, and we're joined by Paula Harris as well. Thanks for being here, Paula. So one of the things that I think when we put that together, it's like, wow, this can really add up as an expense. So the accumulation, as you said, could be a little bit easier, or the challenges of estate planning when you don't have kids. I imagine when it comes to finding who's going to be that healthcare proxy, who's going to be that trustee, who's going to help with the care in aging, might be a very different kind of proposition.
Again, I'm speaking from my own experience. I think the industry, we do a great job of projecting into the future. But I think where we do a real bad job is like the practicality of, my brother's going to be my healthcare proxy, but when I'm 90 and he's 90, how effective is he going to be?
Yeah, he'll be 92, right? When you're 90 or whatever. Yeah.
So yeah. I always loved, it wasn't a fun story, but we had a female client who was cognitively impaired. Her husband was the trustee of the trust. He had passed away. The co-trustee was his law partner who had cognitive issues. And I'm like, oh, this is just a mess that we got to go to court over. And again, I think sometimes we don't envision ourselves when we're 80 and 90 years old. And, you throw that back to a couple without kids, it really makes it challenging.
I am married and I don't have kids. And so this is something that, my husband and I, when we did our estate plan a few years ago, definitely came up in conversation. And both of his parents are gone. He's got two brothers. Neither of them are local. I have two sisters. Both of them are local. And neither one of them has children either. So we all sort of, we kind of joke that as we get older, we're probably just all going to live in one big house together. And then, like, at the end, just all go out with one big bang, like, would be the easiest way to take care of it.
I'm not,
But,
yes.
but it is true. One of them has, we all have our affairs in order. We all have our estate documents. We're all at least like responsible when it comes to that. But I'm the oldest, and so statistically might be the first of us to go, but my two younger sisters also have chronic, autoimmune diseases as well. So there's no guaranteeing, who's going to be around longer and able to make decisions for anybody. But we're all in our early 40s, and fingers crossed, like, we've got some decades ahead of us to not necessarily have to worry about these things. But it is definitely, it's a concern, and I think about it all the time, given what I do for a profession.
When we think about the planning process, is there anything you do differently with clients that do have kids from clients that don't have kids? Is there any kind of, the estate planning is obviously one of those considerations, but are there other aspects of the financial plan that are somehow unique, or is it really limited to these questions of estate planning?
I'll answer for mine, and it's all anecdotal. Again, I think, a lot of times the financial plan, the family is centerpiece, and you're thinking about life insurance and things like that. So it's really just a different paradigm that you're planning on. Things like disability insurance and long-term care insurance obviously have much greater weight to a couple without kids than a couple with kids. Chris, I don't know if your kids are listening, but let them know they're going to be taking care of you when you get older.
Exactly right.
Us people without kids, we have to start scratching our heads going, how are we going to deal with this? So
as a reality, that's an excellent point too, because there's oftentimes families who do have kids that the kids may or may not be very good choices for their help in their as they age, whether they actually do step up and are a good choice for they're going to take care of me, may not be the actual plan that the kids plan on as well, so it may not be as different in that respect sometimes too, right? Hopefully my kids will, but
well, Chris, it's funny you say that, because Bill probably said we don't have kids, and I did a stint as an adjunct professor at a college, and I came home one day and said, I have seen the future, and I think we have to have our own children.
You were in tears almost.
I was like, oh my gosh, like I always thought, like, you don't know whether your own kids will take care of you. And then I looked at the pool of kids that would be potentially an age group to take care of, and I was like, this is even scarier. Like, who the heck are we going to rely on?
Yeah. And as you look at the demographics, I live on Cape Cod, and there's like fewer and fewer people in the demographics that will be able to provide the care and the help in certain places. So cost of living and all this kind of thing. So, okay. So let's say this is going to focus primarily on the estate planning elements of this then.
Chris, just agreeing with that, but like generational wealth is just not a big concern for couples.
Yeah.
Couples without kids. Sorry, I can't even say
Is charitable planning an important part of it, or is it mostly, we'll give it to those nephews and nieces, or, some relatives of some kind?
It depends.
Always the case, right?
You might go in with a couple, and I'm making this up, and the wife might say, I want to give it to the local animal shelter, and the husband's rolling his eyes going, that ain't going to happen. We're going to give it to my old college, and so we spend a ton of time religiously making sure beneficiary forms are filled out and contingents are named on beneficiary forms. And that usually kind of stops the conversation. It's like they reach their primary, but after that, it's like, I don't want your brother on my stuff. Like, it's different every time. It's very difficult. It's very difficult and challenging to plan.
Well,
Yeah.
even having been through our own planning, we signed our estate planning documents on Valentine's Day, and we joke there's no other better way to say love on Valentine's Day is than sign your estate documents.
Your estate plan. Yeah.
Yeah. But, thinking about professional trustees to make those decisions rather than relying on family, mine are all spread out around, not really anywhere close, and as we get older, sometimes you get more distance. So it's like, who
Yeah.
do you rely on? So those professionals.
Let's talk about that for a
good.
minute then, Paula. Professional trustees can range from banks typically to
Estate planning attorneys.
law firms.
Yeah.
Also will grow older. The people you deal with when you're, you know what I mean? They may be peers.
Absolutely.
They be in practice, the people or the firm, if it's a smaller firm. And then what? There may be some specialty organizations that deal with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Again,
I think there's a huge opportunity for that to be a future profession, even more so, and especially around the healthcare. I think a lot of times you'll find there are attorneys or there are other people that can be appointed by the courts that will step in to act as that healthcare person. Sometimes that's more in a situation where it's there's nobody else to do it. So hopefully people have a wider set of options, but there are those resources, but those are far and few between too. And a lot of people who do those are going to be older people, so they're aging out of that as well. And how many younger people will step in, because it's a big responsibility to look out for someone from a healthcare and financial perspective.
I had also imagined too, it's one thing for a financial institution to say, sure, we'll act as your trustee, thinking they're going to manage your portfolio. But that may be very different from, hey, I'm having health issues and cognitive issues and need, a more engaged involvement in some respects. Who's going to actually be that help for you? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do you navigate finding the right place? Has got to be very challenging when it's someone who maybe just doesn't have an interest in you as a family member or as a close friend, someone who knows you well. And then those decisions that may be decisions, as you were talking about, healthcare decisions, who's going to make those? What's their interest?
Right.
Is there a conflict of interest?
You're really going to need a team of people, right? You're going to need somebody to make healthcare decisions for you. You're going to need someone to make maybe like the big picture financial decisions, like a financial planner or, certainly a tax preparer. And then maybe also somebody like a daily money manager that can actually like pay your bills for you and take care of your mail and that sort of thing. So
and
I don't think it's one person.
Are really high there's got to be oversight of that as well for accountability, right? Because the potential for malfeasance or whatever is high when someone has unfettered access to finances, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting there talking about it, it scares me to death thinking about it. And, I'm jokingly saying, meet Mortimer Jones. He was hired as our new trust officer. He'll be the one pulling the plug if you get ill. Couples go in, one of them can, advocate for you talk about healthcare, but advocate like with care and all that kind of stuff. When you're down to a single person or you're both cognitively impaired or something like that.
Yeah, you may not have an advocate.
That situation becomes real. And it's like, okay, who's going to fight for me? So I think, Kathleen, you touched on a very important point. Having that team around you is huge. And most couples without kids aren't really thinking about this. You can, as the saying goes, bring the horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And it is tough planning. It's challenging. And I know we talk on the business side of this a little. If you want to create a niche, this is certainly a great place for someone to start looking at because it's a big market.
I have some close relationships with local senior centers. Especially I've developed some of them partly because my parents are using them more, and they are a treasure trove of resources, especially for the people without kids. The hard part is some people will say, I'm a joiner, and some people are not joiners. So I got called into our local senior center about a year ago, and it was a woman who didn't have kids. She also had never married, and she was an only child. So she was definitely having cognitive issues and some paranoia. So she didn't trust the telephone company, the electric company. She didn't trust anyone. And, I said to her, I would just help her try to figure these things out. And she was like, I'm not paying for it. And I said, I just would help you. I won't even charge you. And she still couldn't bridge that gap of being able to help. But I think turning to those senior centers are a great place for us as professionals to say, who do you have in this local area that can help support these clients? And then also I've referred services to them to help people who are in these types of situations. So that's another avenue of kind of where to look for support.
Yeah, certainly. I live down the street from my town senior center, and I signed up for their newsletter just to kind of keep tabs on like it's definitely not the circles I'm running in these days, but I just kind of like to see like what's going on in town and like who the people are that are advertising in the newsletter, that sort of thing. And um I think someday, when I when I age up into being able to hang out down there, like they've got a lot of stuff going on. And I think it
They do.
definitely we always talk about how social engagement as you get older is like so important, and not just for like the resources for your local senior center, but like people getting engaged in activities, and like maybe you do make some friends that can be there for support if you need them if you don't have kids. But I think it also kind of makes the argument for, I know so many people want to age in place and stay at home, but if you are single and you don't have kids or don't have family, like I think the argument for getting settled in some sort of like continuing care retirement facility like just makes a ton of sense, because
It's a
then
great
you're
point.
surrounded by a team of professionals that can be there as you need them and can kind of monitor you. And I know that that's such like a hard thing for people to want to sometimes do, because people just they want to stay at home, but I think it's an important consideration for people to think about.
I agree with you. I keep saying, just if that happens to me, I'm going back to college. I'm going to be living in the dorms.
Right?
It was
Yeah.
a lot of
It
fun
looks
then.
fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun this time around.
I think there's a lot of validity to that too, Kathleen. I think it's a good observation. I've had some clients in a similar kind of mindset where they have thought, okay, these were older women in retirement, single, and thinking in terms of, and in some cases there was a woman who was going with a friend to go check out all these different continuing care retirement communities together. Not that they were going to land in the same place, but they were both thinking it through at the same time and going on the tours and things, and kind of gave them someone to talk to about what'd you like about this one, what didn't you like about that one, a little bit of the process. But I think there's a lot of validity to that, not just for the things, Bill, as you were saying about the, it does have a certain element of college, like you're surrounded by your peers. There's lots of fun things to do, keeps people young, and engaged and well nourished, and probably more physically active, and just a variety of intellectually more stimulated and so forth. There's lots of virtues to it, but is that opportunity for, if you have a problem, someone will notice you didn't come out of your room. If you fall in the shower, there's a chain you could pull, or fill in the blank. You follow my point. That there's more a more ready access to what's going on. Someone should be checking that if there was a need for that would become more evident more quickly than if you lived independently. There can be virtue to that for sure. So that's a really good point. Those kinds of opportunities might be more important to give weight to in that circumstance. I'd like to maybe just go back to some of the other things, just maybe go through it a little bit more granularly, talking about healthcare proxy. That's different from the financial decisions. This is just the healthcare. Is there a pecking order? I would imagine there's like, oh, well, I think my nephew, my niece, whatever, might be one choice if you have that kind of a relation. It could be a friend. Maybe some friends are younger than others, that kind of thing. Will they be sufficiently capable? What do you do when you get past that kind of friend or relative kind of connection when it comes to someone to make good healthcare decisions on your behalf? I don't have any great ideas. I don't know of any kind of organization, legal or otherwise, that puts themselves out there as will be your healthcare proxy.
There are some elder attorneys I think will do that.
Is that right?
Yeah, there's one I know in Pembroke who will oversee. Well, they'll oversee your health decisions. So I assume that means they would be the healthcare proxy. And as
sometimes there's people who you can hire as an advocate, though, to be helping you navigate getting the right appointments, getting the right medication. That's interesting. Do you think something like that might also offer the ability to be a healthcare proxy?
I was not putting them in the same organization, the same bucket, but I do think, I think about it. I sit on a board for NVNA and hospice, and they have a program called the Navigator 27 where you can call and they'll help you figure out for an hourly rate, like how to navigate all these things. And I think a lot of the home care agency, the bigger ones, have something like that, so that they would go to the doctor's appointments with you. They would, be there to advocate on your behalf. But I think there are literally attorneys too that will, I don't know if they would take on the responsibility of making the healthcare decision itself, but I know some attorneys get pretty deep into this too. So I think it's two different sets of resources.
It does make the point, though. One probably needs good resources, good financial resources, substantial wealth, be able to afford, this kind of assistance, right?
Well, I think it falls into two buckets, like most things. The people who have a lot of financial resources can figure that out. The people who have absolutely none, the state will step in and do it for them. And it's those people in the middle. That's the people we worry about when we're doing the planning, because they have enough to get by day to day, but they don't have enough for for super long extended problems or, it's a very tricky situation.
Though if we are talking about couples without children, the chances that they do have more financial resources is probably higher.
Yeah.
Right. I think, there's no, I kind of joke like there's no greater path to financial independence than not having children. But I think
I bet it's like all things, though, Kathleen, where some people live entirely with their means within their means, or maybe even exceeding their means, and some do not. You know what I mean? So some people
100%. It was a little tongue in cheek, but
yeah,
totally.
You know what I mean, though, right?
Yep. So totally.
Yeah.
When I was researching this, first of all, this isn't a thing of mine, but everyone has their pronouns. But there's child-free and childless, and I guess there's a you one or the other. Childless is obviously you might have kids in the future, but that was just something. But the book that kept coming up all the time was Die with Zero for this group. So I haven't read the book, Paul. I believe you have read the book, but that seemed to be like the Bible for this group. Maybe not a Bible, but it was.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They're like, what's the point in having something to pass on if it's not really someone you want to pass it on to so much?
Right.
Let's live within use it all up before we're gone.
The tricky part of the planner and me is, well, can you tell me when you're going to be gone so that you can make that last check clear or bounce or whatever? But that's, so many people, like, especially if there's been some type of family health issue, they've had a health issue, a major world event, they're like, we have to live now. And it's like, well, you may live 30 more years from now. So how do you balance all that? And we had a very wise woman who was a client who died. I think she died at like 98. And she says, I don't know how much it's going to cost to take me out of this world. So, we had a client who just died at like 93, 94. And we kept saying, I think you should gift more. But he gave us the reason why of his several $1 million, he didn't feel comfortable gifting. And I was like, well, yeah, I can see that. You don't know how much longer you may live and how much it's going to cost you.
It's going to go to someone eventually, but I want to make sure you have enough. Yeah.
Right. That's the tricky part. And did anyone else read Die with Zero?
I know about it. It's on my list of books I want to read.
Yeah, it was. I liked parts of it, and then parts of it was like, the planner was like, you still have to make sure.
Yeah, you don't know how long. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that it's tricky, but yeah, that's where I come back to. I love to talk about charitable giving, and so really, this is a great opportunity for this group. But some people just are never charitably inclined, and some are, and that's the tricky part.
The fun part about charitable giving is sometimes you get that backdoor. Well, we could do some tax planning,
Yep. Yeah. If that's a motivation, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
And
but I agree, especially these days. I don't know about you guys. We're talking so much more about the qualified charitable distribution for retirees. It seems like it's really caught on more than it had in the past.
And I think there's a little bit of a subtle difference. Like if you like rather than talking about estate planning necessarily, if you shift the conversation to talking about legacy planning, because I think like you can still have a legacy and want to like leave a mark on this world without necessarily doing that through your kids, right? And maybe that is through charitable planning, or maybe it's through, some other means. But I'd like to think of it in those terms as opposed to like just making sure like I've got my will in place.
It's a great point. Yeah, that emphasis on it's not about the document, it's about having an impact or something like that with your resources that you leave behind.
Right.
sometimes people don't want it to be about them and that legacy. So often we'll encourage to think about, well, you don't have to name your legacy after you. You can, we had a friend who donated something significant for a nonprofit, and he named it in his mother's honor. So I think how you navigate that conversation, some people, it will be like the ego will be fed and they really do want it to be about their legacy, but it can be about someone else's. A lot, whenever I make any charitable gift, if I have any tie to that organization, I make it in someone's memory or honor. Like, why waste a gift, because you can impact someone's life, even a small way, like, oh, wow, you thought about me. So I just think, you can do this. Your gift can be, to the founder of the organization. It could be in legacy of somebody else, but it's a wonderful opportunity to make sure that good in this world keeps happening.
And I think it's a really good way to just deepen your relationships with clients, right? By like really trying to dig into that and help them explore like what they do want to have an impact on and what they do want to leave a legacy. Like I started working with somebody earlier this year, guy whose wife passed away at like the age of 53 from cancer, and they don't have any children, and so he's going through all this right now. Like he's going to have to update his estate documents, and he's thinking through like he picked up the book Die with Zero, but he's talking about doing some sort of charitable thing in his wife's memory that she would be happy about. But he financially he's fine. Like he can retire and like just do whatever he wants, but now he's trying to figure out like what that next chapter looks like. And that's the hard part. I mean, losing his wife obviously was like incredibly difficult going through that, but they did all the big trips that they wanted to do. They checked a lot of things off the bucket list, and now the struggle is trying to figure out like how he wants to spend his time and his resources going forward. And it's
get
tough.
meaning in his life going forward. Yeah.
Right.
And that's tough to reimagine sometimes, I think sometimes we're so close to these issues that I don't know what's important to me, that kind of thing. It's sometimes hard to see the forest for the trees.
Right. Because we do spend a lot of time talking about getting older and needing people to make healthcare decisions for us when we're like in our 90s and everyone around us is gone. But, it's a different story, I think, when you are in your, much younger years and lose a spouse or somebody important to you that may have been like that backbone and that decision maker for you. It's a whole other ball game, I think.
As a planner, I like what I'm doing. Like the thought of retirement, I'm always like, what would I do?
Yeah.
And so I reemphasize what we're talking about. It's like, it's just not an easy thing to conceptualize. You can pretend like you're thrown into the situation, but until you're actually faced with those emotions, like it's a different world.
I want to go back to one other thing, just because it popped into my head when we were talking about it earlier. We're talking about the idea of other people handling your money. The Netflix movie I Care a Lot came into my head. I don't know if any of you seen this.
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because I watched so much stuff, I might have seen it.
Who's the actress in it, Chris? Because I watched it right after we did the elder care curriculum with Annalee Kruger.
Pike, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, that was terrifying. But
Oh, goodness.
It's
right.
about this woman who's basically a con artist who scams people, older people, out of their wealth and gets them confined to some kind of home, and that kind of thing.
she gets
And
herself like appointed as a
appointed
court-appointed guardian for all
Yeah.
these people, and then just like
and then
takes all
sells
their
all their stuff and takes a
Yeah,
big
awful.
chunk of it. There's more to the movie than that, so it like has a little twist. So I won't spoil it.
Okay.
our
I
listeners.
will put it on the list.
But you can't help but think of it when you're thinking about other people handling your money and this whole idea of guardianships and all this kind of thing.
That I remember seeing it and just being like horrified afterwards.
Exactly. Right. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Well,
It's that easy to do, that kind of thing.
Just
But I think it's that kind of
real-
fear that, people have, that you're talking about, this person who is a little paranoid. Stuff like this feeds that,
First of all, there needs to be some planning around that to begin with. I mean, I think I learned a valuable lesson years ago. I had a client, husband had a pension from the state, and the wife had a huge IRA, and they needed experimental medication, and they had to take money out of the IRA. The problem was the wife wasn't cognitively enough able to make that decision. The husband there was no power of attorney, no anything. So
authority.
just having those basic documents in place with the husband and wife are huge. Now we're talking a whole other dimension. Okay, who's going to do that after that? So I don't have an easy answer, but you got to have these conversations.
And it takes time to think it through and figure it out. And it's not there's not a quick fix, is I think the bottom line. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I always love having, if clients have money at the big custodians like Schwab or Fidelity, like getting those POAs in place on the account using those forms, and not, even if they have the legal POA document and clients are like, well, I have this document. I'm like, just because you have it doesn't mean it's going to be easy to use it when you need to. So like, getting those authorizations on the accounts, or if they're elderly, getting a kid on it or your trusted contact on it before you need it can just make all the difference.
Yeah, we had to go through one of those in COVID, and yes, they had the power of attorney document. We sent it up to the custodian, who will remain nameless, and we waited and waited. In COVID, that person's working from home, and it was just like it took months. So you want to make sure these things are ironclad before you get into a situation.
Heck yeah.
So we are starting a project right now to look at our clients that are 60 and older and get those POAs, DPOAs on file through the custodian. We know it's going to take a while because it's going to be hard to motivate some of the younger people why it's important, and maybe some of the older too, but that's something we're going to
elaborate what you're doing. So you're trying to go through your client database to do what exactly? Like actually get those on
file with the custodian. Yep.
So does that activate the power of attorney at that time, or is it just to have it on file that should it be needed, that this is the plan?
With the anticipation that it would just be on file if needed.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good practice.
And we had a client who had a stroke over a year ago. I mean, it never really came out of the stroke. And that one's even a trickier situation. But how do you handle all these things when you need to do things quickly?
Yeah, and if you're dealing with someone who's already, let's say cognitively impaired, and they want their own form, I mean, then isn't that invalid? This was an interesting conversation. I appreciate you guys making the time. Is there anything anybody wants to add as far as maybe parting thoughts in this regard?
People who are older, I think this is a trend that's going to grow and continue.
Yeah.
And usually these people want to have many careers, and so planning for those multiple careers. But the use of 529 with childless couples is a big deal. They can, hey, I'm doing this job now, but I might want to be a college professor down the road. And so there's going to be some education along the way. Like using some of the tools that are available are just a great thing. So I think it's not all doom and gloom at the end of life. There's some opportunities there as well. And again, I think, life insurance is such a big deal, traditional planning, but the other insurances, from disability and long-term care, I think don't overlook those, because they're a big part of this.
They become even more of a priority. Huh?
Yeah. And then just a crazy thing, which researching this originally, the topic of euthanasia was a big deal. Now we're going back the other way again. Sorry.
No, but that's
But I'm not. I don't want to go there. I don't really have an opinion, but people have these conversations and they talk about it.
I hear people joke about it all the time. That just going to pull out the pillow. And used to be, we'll call Dr. Kevorkian, or there's always some kind of lighthearted, but underpinning of they have that kind of mindset that they would like to maybe plan for the ability to go at the same time or something along those lines, or not have a prolonged long-term care cognitive decline or something like that. It's an interesting thought process in terms of in society, is there a greater acceptance of that as a possible planning decision?
Maybe as our demographic continues to get older and the baby boomers continue to get older, maybe that'll be the impetus for that to kind of gain more traction. I don't know.
I don't know if it should or shouldn't. I know Paula's like looking at it from a moral point of view.
I am
horrified by
my faith guides me that it's God's will on these situations. And
Paula, can you share a story? You met someone, I don't know if they were on the plane and their mother or whatever was going over to Europe for assisted suicide.
Oh, that's a client, Bill. This was kind of, her mother got a diagnosis in her 90s, and she did not want to have any treatment. So she got her life in order, went to a European country. The daughter and granddaughter flew with her. And the daughter said to me, it was the weirdest thing to know your mother's going to die at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. I flew with my mother and I flew home without her. And it was like the implications, I had chills as she talked about this. The implications for the rest of the family were like the ripples of emotion and feelings. And it is a very complicated, that's the one person's decision, but the impact to so many others, and having to walk that mother through and then clean up. She got her affairs in order, but you still have to clean it up at the end. The moral issues are tough. And I feel like as a country, we don't have as much faith, active people practicing faith. This topic becomes, the secular side of it becomes so much more popular. And how this all plays out is very interesting.
To end it on a light note, I will say, so something I recently learned, I think the first time I heard the phrase DINK, double income, no kids,
Yes.
was years ago working with a client at a couple, like 2 firms ago or 3 firms ago, who were dinks, and they mentioned it in conversation. I was like, what does that mean? And then they told me what it meant, and we had a good chuckle. And then recently I learned a new term, dinkwad. Has anyone heard this yet? Double income, no kids with a dog.
Oh.
So we were dinks for a very long time, and then about a year and a half ago, my husband and I became dinkwads. That's my way to end.
That's a much lighter note. Yeah. Thank you, Kathleen.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Dinks and dinkwads. I love it.
I mean, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. I think it's something, as a planning area, it does have some of its own unique considerations, and it's worthy of some time and thought. And if there's more to talk about in the future, we'll have you guys back. So, all right, everybody, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us.
If you'd like to learn more about the Financial Planning Association or FPA New England, visit our websites, financialplanningassociation.org for the National Association or fpanewengland.org. You can learn more about our organization and all the upcoming chapter events. We hope you'll join. That's fpanewengland.org. Until next time, have a wicked good day.